Hello and welcome to The Edge, where we'll take an in-depth analysis of today's top stories by looking beyond the edge. We'll bring you not just the facts, but also deep insights into the topics with expert opinions and social media reactions. Let's make a start with our look beyond the edge. More than 1,000 Afghan security personnel fled across the border into Afghanistan after Taliban advances in northern Afghanistan. The crossings underscore a rapidly deteriorating situation in the country, as foreign troops near a complete withdrawal after 20 years of war in Afghanistan and with peace negotiations stalled. What kind of situation awaits the country if the foreign troops are fully withdrawn? The United Nations said that Libyan delegates have failed to agree on a legal framework to hold presidential and parliamentary elections later this year, putting an agreed-upon roadmap to end the conflict there in jeopardy. What are the key disagreements, and why can't parties reach an agreement? And England is now expecting to move into a period without legal restrictions for COVID-19. The public will have to exercise personal responsibility, including on face masks, after imposing the most onerous constraints on behaviour in Britain's peacetime history to battle the coronavirus. But how will people adapt themselves to this new normal? So these are the top three stories that we'll be taking a look at today from Beyond the Edge. Let's get started. The withdrawal of US troops from Afghanistan plays an important factor in the Afghan peace process. Our following infographic gives an overview of the US troops' presence in Afghanistan. And to discuss the current situation in Afghanistan and where it's going, I'm joined live from Ankara by Gal Luft, who's a security analyst and professor with Ostim Teknik University. Gal, thank you for joining us again here today on The Edge. The situation in Afghanistan, particularly in the north, is looking worrying at the moment. There was an agreement, I assume, for the organised withdrawal of the troops, and that the Taliban wouldn't try and take over. But that looks like that's what's happening. The Taliban are moving in and chasing the Afghan government troops off. Well, what's happening?
It's a mess. Really, it's as bad as it could have been, in the sense that the US intelligence community has never been overly excited about the possibility of unilateral withdrawal without an agreement. That said, the Biden administration, or Biden himself, decided to overrule the opinion of the intelligence community and announced the withdrawal to be scheduled to be completed by September 11th, which will be the 20th anniversary of the terror attacks. What happened since then, the Taliban has become extremely emboldened. And even before the withdrawal is completed, they have already launched attack in the north. And we are learning that over 1,000 soldiers of the Afghan army have actually fled the country and crossed the border into Tajikistan. This means that the army that the U.S. invested so much in building and training seems to be failing. This is a very alarming sign when well over 1,000 troops abandon their weapons and run away from the country. It doesn't tell us a good story about what is about to happen once U.S. troops, NATO troops, completely withdraw from the country. And it shows you almost everything you need to know about the resiliency and the commitment of the Afghan army. And that certainly emboldens the Taliban to continue with their offensive and to capture as many districts and provinces they can. And once the U.S. Army will be out of there, there'll be very little resistance, except maybe in the capital. But even that, I'm not sure. By the way, the U.S. intelligence revised its analysis, and now they're predicting that the current government will not last for more than 6 months. So it seems that the investment of 20 years is going down the drain.
Absolutely. And this seems even more shocking in a sense that this is happening not just days after certain troops have withdrawn, but there are still troops in Afghanistan right now, and yet the Taliban is already on the move. They haven't waited and is looking to restore the situation to status quo ante. So before 20 years ago, when they had a stronghold on that part of Afghanistan. So does the future look bleak?
Well, it seems like we've made one big 20-year circle, and we're back to where we were 20 years ago. Although I must say that I think that many of the analysts have had exaggerated expectations about what could be achieved in a country that is not really a country, but a collation of tribes and they don't show a lot of unity to a centralized regime. And I think we all have to be a little bit more realistic with what could be accomplished in a country like this. That said, it doesn't mean that the U.S. needs to stay there forever. You know, at some point you have to realize that you've done all you can. After losing thousands of soldiers and almost $1 trillion that have been poured into the country, and things are not moving in the right direction, it is a legitimate decision to decide to pull the plug and let Afghanistan be what it will. We cannot save people from themselves, and with all the efforts and the goodwill, sometimes it's not good enough, and it's not enough to change the weaknesses, the inherent weaknesses of the country.
And what's interesting, what we shouldn't forget as well, is that this didn't all start 20 years ago. The internal conflicts and power struggles in Afghanistan didn't start just 20 years ago, did it? The history goes back to the 1980s and probably even before that. So in terms of seeking a national unity, if the government forces are pulling away, although the government has talked back on that, saying that this is just a temporary defeat and that they'll come back. Are there any hopes for finding some overall control of the country?
Well, I think that both in Iraq and Afghanistan, the concept of national unity is an oxymoron. It's these are not countries, particularly Afghanistan, which is a very tribal and mountainous area. National unity, I think, is a very, very high bar to reach. Expectations should be much, much lower. I think it's legitimate to expect a governing, self-governing institutions, welfare system, civil society. These kind of things I think, are achievable. And I think that the United States and its allies will have to also reconsider their long-held position, which, by the way, the Trump administration deviated from, that the Taliban, if and when it takes over control over the country, is a legitimate partner, and some agreements could be reached with the Taliban, especially when it comes to exporting terrorism and things like this, which is the reason why the U.S. is there to begin with.
Absolutely. Well, it looks as though maybe some from outside, we need to try and understand how Afghanistan can function in the future, how to work together with these different factions to bring a cohesiveness. After 20 years, we should have learned some lessons, or the world should have learned some lessons. Let's hope that before too long, and before another 20 years passes, they can get those things sorted out. Galuf, thank you so much for joining us today here on The Edge. Thank you.
Thank you.
Taliban entered direct talks with the United States back in 2018, and US President Joe Biden said that the American pullout is justified, as US forces made sure Afghanistan cannot become a base for terrorists to plot against the West again. The Taliban has ceased attacks on Western forces, but continues to target Afghan government and security installations as it makes rapid territorial gains across the country, while peace talks between the two sides remain inconclusive. I hope the attacks will stop in order to prevent more casualties. For now, let's move on from Afghanistan to another crisis-driven country, namely Libya. On the 5th of February, Libya's rival political groups agreed in UN-mediated talks to form an interim unity government to lead the country to elections this December. Our following infographic explains the process. I'm now joined from Istanbul by Abdul Qadir Assad, who's an analyst and journalist. Abdul Qadir, thank you so much for joining us here today on A News.
Thanks for having me.
What I want to ask you, the interim government has been set up in Libya with the aim on the 24th of December of holding elections, and they've been having discussions with the 75-member body in Geneva. I believe those discussions are hitting some problems. Can you explain to us what is the difficulty in Libyans planning for their future?
Yes, to start and put things into context, first of all, what's the whole Libyan political dialogue forum was based on kind of like quota system. It's a corrupt system, actually. And that's why what started, a thing that started, in corruption will end finally in failure, as we've seen a couple days ago. So the LBDF 75 members, went on meeting for 5 days in Geneva in order to decide constitutional basis for the elections in December this year. These members have like a very important two vital issues to discuss. First is the constitutional basis, and second is the presidential elections or the candidates for the elections for the presidential election. So the constitutional basis is facing a lot of backlash from the spoilers. We have so many spoilers, local spoilers, who are, split between West and East Libya, who don't want the conflict to end, because when the conflict ends, it ends their interests in power and authority. We have the House of Representatives in Eastern Libya, and we have other parties in Western Libya that are benefiting from the chaos. So they don't want Libyans to go to elections and vote for a new parliament so that they can keep their posts and they can keep their chairs, as they have done for the last 7 years.
So is this why the US Special Envoy for Libya has accused several in the forum of trying to insert poison pills to make sure that the elections don't happen?
Absolutely. These are the poison pills. And actually, the blame goes as well to the UNSMIL, the UN Support Mission, because it is allowing it's allowing these members to somehow manipulate the dialogue and manipulate the Libyan people. And the UNSMIL, the UN Support Mission, should have should have a better role in moderating the dialogue and the meetings in order to achieve results that meet up the aspirations of the Libyan people. And we have a very important issue I wanted to touch upon, which is the presidential candidates. Mm-hmm. Now, the main issue that has been, splitting the 75 members in Geneva over the past 5 days is actually the dual citizenship and the military position of the candidate of the presidential election, the president of Libya. So Haftar's supporters were pushing the UN Support Mission and pushing the LBDF to accept that a dual citizen, a Libyan and another with another foreign citizenship, to run for elections. But other LBDF members are pushing for the opposite. So this was a kind of division between Haftar supporters and the rest of the LBDF members. Another thing is that the presidential candidate should step down from any military position before running for president. But Haftar supporters pushing for Haftar to run for president, they want the presidential candidate to run for election, president of Libya, and if he won, of course, and then he can step down. So they don't want the stepping down to come before running for elections. So this was a major setback in the Geneva 5 days or 5-day meetings. That split the LBDF members. Plus the negative, I can see it, I believe it was a negative role of the UN Support Mission, because it allowed a very poisonous rhetoric to spread among the members without any benefits for the Libyan people. So they were talking about their own narrow personal interests, leaving out the interest and the aspirations of the Libyan people, which is to go to free and transparent elections by December 24th. The constitutional basis is also a very major controversial issue, because some LBDF members want to pass the basis that the legal committee came up with, but others who are spoiling the process and who want to prolong the process are going for something else. They are going actually for the constitutional draft, which was done by the Constitution Drafting Assembly. They want referendum, and they want so many things that cannot be done before December 24th, which is a way to actually get in the way of December elections being held on time.
So there's a tremendous amount of work still to be done. Let's hope that these talks can get back on track and that they can resolve the issues. Abdul Qadir Assad, thank you so much for joining us here today on The Edge. It's a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Participants in the UN-brokered talks discussed several proposals for a constitutional basis for the elections, including some that were not consistent with the roadmap that sets the vote for the 24th of December, when Libyans are due to freely elect the next administration. We hope it will bring peace and stability into the region. Let's now move on to our final topic and discuss the easing of COVID restrictions in the United Kingdom. The UK is easing some restrictions while COVID-19 variants continue to spread all over the world. Our following infographic gives an overview of the spread of variants. I'm joined live from Weston-super-Mare in the United Kingdom by Professor Parag Singhal, who's a consultant endocrinologist and National Secretary of the British Association of Physicians of Indian origin. Dr. Singhal, thank you for joining us again here today on The Edge. And first of all, I must congratulate you and all members of the National Health Service on your 73rd anniversary today as an institution.
Yeah, thank you. I think it has been a great day. NHS has been a great institution for last so many years, serving the population of United Kingdom, and it has done a great job. And I think, yeah, you're right. Congratulations to all NHS workers and to people of this country.
Well, and let's hope that the lessons are learnt and more support is given to the NHS in the future, as indeed to all health services around the world, which have so much deserve all the support that they can get. Now, the big news today, of course, even in the last few hours, Boris Johnson has been making new announcements, also the Health Secretary in Parliament, that restrictions are planned, pending a review in a week or so. Restrictions are planned to be totally removed, but on the 19th of July. How do you see this panning out? What's the latest that we understand for the situation in the UK?
Yeah, I think the announcement has been made that after 19th of July, there would not be any restrictions, literally easing of restrictions in terms of masks becoming optional exercise. And, people can resume normal life, whether inside the house or in places like wedding places. And I can understand, and I think a lot of people can understand the reasons behind this announcement. Vaccine has been a game changer and has brought a lot of success, especially in the United Kingdom. There is desire on the part of the government and on part of everybody to resume normalcy, to bring hope to people, to bring life back to normal, and more importantly, to kickstart the economy. Mm-hmm. And the government obviously is looking at the data, which is very promising, that the number of hospitalizations is low. So vaccine clearly has been very effective. And probably government also looked at the data from US, where 99% of the admissions are people or belonging to those people who have not been vaccinated. But equally, we have to look at the other side as well. Yes, mortality has been low, which is good news after vaccination. but there are still around 25,000 cases every day, which is more or less similar to last autumn 2020, which is just beginning of second wave. That's number one. The number of hospitalizations is around 2,000, gradually rising. So it's not that hospitalizations are not happening. And now look at the population which has been vaccinated. 85% of UK population has received both first dose, and 65% have received both the doses. Effectively meaning that there is still significant number of people who are not vaccinated or yet to be vaccinated. And that brings us to the question, is it too premature or is it too early that a step has been taken to lift the mask and making it optional for people? Mask, when we are talking about it, is the biggest factor in reducing the spread and also reducing the severity of the disease.
True.
And using a mask is not only for the protection of the person wearing the mask, but also protection of others. And we are assuming by lifting the restrictions that people will be making wise choices. And we know that people don't often make wise choices. Indeed. So personally, where I stand, I would have probably continued at least social distancing and wearing the mask for some more time till the population is vaccinated. And even after vaccination, one could have argued that maybe mask is going to be a new normal phenomena, although yes, restrictions can be eased off, but wearing a mask is not a huge thing. And if I'm going to supermarket, would I like to wear a mask? Yes. Would I like other person closer to me wearing a mask? Absolutely. Yeah. Would I like to get symptomatic disease? No. Vaccines do not offer 100% protection. There are still people who are going to get disease despite being vaccinated. Yes, they may not get hospitalization, but they still can get symptomatic disease. So I think there are different factors which need to be considered, and one can understand government's point of view, restoring life to normalcy, and life cannot continue as it is. But maybe mask probably could have been made, could have continued.
Yes, there's also a great psychological thing, isn't there? That if you see people wearing masks, and they just have the back of your mind that yes, we need to be careful. But if people aren't wearing masks, then we forget that we need to continue taking care. And of course, we also, it doesn't take into account the fact that there are people who are immunocompromised and who are at grave risk, and we should continue to look after them.
Absolutely. I think it's such an important thing, the psychological element you have mentioned, because removing the mask sends a message to public that everything is back to normal. There's no need to observe any what you call a COVID appropriate behavior or whatever you call it. And you're so right. There are so many people who are at very high risk, and despite vaccination, they can acquire infection at a drop of a hat, and that infection can be quite serious in those high-risk individuals whose immunity is low. And I think we should be respectful of them, and we should look after them, as you say. So that's why I think probably I would say it's possible that this is a step which probably would be reviewed later on, and maybe mask could be a new normal phenomena, at least for foreseeable future.
And certainly in certain circumstances. And the other worrying thing is that there are a large number of young people who are now contracting the illness, which I think a larger proportion than before. People going out to watch the football in pubs and coming home and bringing coronavirus back with them. What's your message to them for this summer after these restrictions are probably lifted? What would you want to say to them?
So the young people, yes, they are low risk, but low risk doesn't mean that you cannot get hospitalized. Low risk doesn't mean that the disease cannot be fatal in certain individuals. My message is very simple, that the disease, even if symptomatic and not leading to hospitalization, can be quite nasty, and the symptoms can be quite disabling for many days. And I think the one thing which social distancing and masks do offer is reducing the viral load. Close proximity, going to crowded places in pubs, football matches, sitting next to each other without appropriate mask or whatever, is only going to increase your proximity, and proximity means viral load is going to increase, and increasing viral load means severity of the disease is going to be high. So this is a message which has to go to young people that, look, And spread then can become very easy. And once the disease starts spreading again, then mutations become very easy. Yes. So I think in order for us to overcome this battle of COVID, we have to reduce the spread. Therefore, my message is, yes, even if you're going, you must wear a mask and maintain as much social distancing as possible.
Well, let's hope that people hear that and that message continues to spread. If nothing else spreads, that the message spreads that we should continue to take care not only of ourselves but also of our neighbours and people we come into touch with. Professor Singhal, thank you so much for joining us here today on The Edge. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Cases of COVID-19 have risen sharply in Britain in recent weeks, driven by the now dominant Delta variant. The final easing of restrictions was delayed by 4 weeks to enable more people to be vaccinated. The coming weeks will show how British people will adapt themselves to their new normal. Our analysts have provided their insights on today's top stories. Let's have a roundup of what they had to say. Before closing our programme, let's take a look at social media to hear your voices and reactions on today's top stories shared with the hashtag masks. And here's what you had to say on Twitter about masks. Claire Ward said, "I will feel more restricted when people don't have to wear masks any longer. I will go in fewer shops and spend less money. Your policy will backfire." Ming Ho says, "Masks primarily protect others, not the wearer. Choice not to wear one is choice to inflict risk on others more than yourself. Selfish, irresponsible and above all destructive to public health. Shame on non-medics Jenrick and Javid for promoting this." And Sarah Kate says, "If you wish to not wear a mask after July 19th in certain settings, then that's your choice. If you do, however, want to continue wearing one, again, that's your choice. But don't attack people who choose not to. I, for one, will be binning mine." Take a look at our video of the day, which tells the story of Ethiopian refugees like Mihret, who dreams of nothing else than sustainable peace.
ከምዚ ንባዕሉ ብሰላም ንወፃ ኣይመስለና ብሂወት ንተርፍ ኣይመስለና ብጣዕሚ ተሰናቢድና ሽዑ መዓልቲ ወለይትና ወፂና ብቲ ቪድዮ ንሪኦ ነርና ሕጂ ብኣካል ኣይንፈልጦ ነርና ሕና ከምኡ ኣባና ርኢናዮ ኣብ ባዕልና በፅሑ ህፃውንቲ ይዕመፅ ኣለዋ ኣዴታት ይዕመፅ ኣለዋ ሓራሳት እዚ ክረኣይ ኣለዎ ክፍለጠልና ኣለዎ ወፃዓዮ ዝሕሎ ደቂ ኣንስትዮ ስፔሻሊ እዚ ኢሕና ናርፍ ናይ ኮንስትራክሽን ዘርፍ ኮንስትራክሽን ኣይሳተፍ ስልጣኒት ናይ ሞያ ምሃሮች ሕጂ ኣብዚ ሳይት ሱፐርቪዥን أنا قلت لكم خاني مقري فلتنا نبات عب سلام بجا هجرنا مالتنا سلام واقعين فوت أنيرنا حزين فينا نسألنا مالت
And that's all for this episode of The Edge with me, Andy Boyne. Stay tuned as we'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth analysis on the top stories and a look beyond the edge.